Welcome to the Pinkpill RX podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking subjects surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok at Caters88.
That is KATORS88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow.
Well, you've become quite the internet sensation, Jay. A man that listens.
Yeah, that's still very strange to me that that's a novel thing, you know?
Is it hard for you to embody knowing that it's not a novel thing and that you are paving the way for difficult conversations?
That makes me sad to think that, like, majority of my gender, people that are made up of the same things I'm made up of, that they are such the antithesis to what it means to embody, like, masculinity in its noble sense. Like, you don't listen? Like, you don't listen? Or you're not open-minded enough to consider different ideas? You're not courageous enough or brave enough to admit that you could be wrong? Like, that sounds like a fear thing. So I'm like, it's mine. I don't get it. I still don't get it. And it makes me sad to think that, like, the majority would be that way. Like, what? And it's very angering too. Like, what the heck's the matter with you? You're too afraid to be wrong, and you don't want to listen, and you don't want to lift up the women in your lives, and you don't want to have your eyes open to what the world actually is like.
Yeah, do you think it's a respect thing? That men lack respect for women? Do you think it's a fear thing? Why do you think men, like, fear women being in charge? I
think it's a mixed bag of three things. Probably, maybe three, maybe two. But one is, I think that, yeah, there probably is a lack of respect that's been fostered towards women, whether that's from your childhood with your family or through the popular culture that you immerse yourself in. It could be that. It could be, and that goes along with, like, oh, maybe you have a superiority complex about it from those things. Yes, fear of women being in positions of power because they will dictate things that affect you, that you might not like, which is ironic to me.
Yeah. Do you think men picture women being in power as just the reverse of how things are now?
Do I think women being empowered is the reverse of what?
Yeah. Do you think that men fear that?
Yeah, I think they honestly, I think they fear that women are like men. Because if the roles were reversed and men were oppressed, and the men get power, men would go off the deep end trying to, like, reverse and promote their own gender and do unto the women what was done to them and stuff. They think women are like men and would be vindictive, possibly. But women aren't like men in that regard. I don't, that's not been my experience anyway.
That's an interesting thought experiment to do, though. Like, hey, if you're a guy, picture women being in charge. Mm-hmm. What is the first feeling that comes to you?
Yeah.
And why is that? And how does that reflect your own gender back to you?
Yeah.
The dominant gender back to you. Because if you're fearful, then that means it would make sense why women are fearful.
Yeah. Right, because they have to experience that as a reality. You're doing it as a thought exercise.
Exactly. So what an interesting little thought exercise.
Yeah, I like that it's such an open-ended thing. Like, how does that make you feel?
Right. So just out of curiosity, we've had a lot of these conversations. It started in April. Mm-hmm. Here we are now. It's been a whirlwind. Mm-hmm. How has it changed you and your interactions with the world, your interactions with peers? Or has it?
You know, I will tell you one far-reaching effect that it's had. And, like, I obviously had a level of open-mindedness before because I listened from the beginning. Mm-hmm. But I think it's made me even more of an open-minded person who's willing to be wrong. Not just about this area, but about every area.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, oh, it's not a fearful or a bad thing to be wrong. It's just I get to learn something I didn't know before and grow from it. You know what I mean? And that's not how I was necessarily at the beginning with that mindset. So that's been a lot of positive growth because of it. I also think it's made me a little bit less of my head in the sand with women's issues in particular, but also with other ones. Just kind of noticing people different from me and having more of an empathetic mind of, like, what is fill in the blank like for them. You know, being more mindful of how I come across, and I also think it's, I feel like I've been less with my head in the sand and more open to like admitting the true atrocities that occur around me, and less of just being in my own bubble, you know, which is a white male privilege to be in that bubble. But to recognize these struggles for women, then I'm like, okay, well, it opens my mind to the struggles for people of a different like socioeconomic class or status, or people who are minorities, or people who live in different communities or a different state or a different country. Like everyone has struggles, and a lot of people have struggles that are different from mine. And that's something that's a new thing to have my eyes very wide open to, you know?
Yeah. No, that's great. Have you had any conversations with peers or anything like that?
Yeah, I remember one in particular, because my social circle is kind of small at the moment, but I remember speaking with a friend of mine who, at the onset of the conversation, I can't remember how we pivoted into to women's struggles, but I don't even like saying women's issues, because that sounds kind of like, oh, they have issues. Yeah. Versus like their struggles.
So should we start saying men's issues with women?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm about to talk about, this conversation. Yeah. You know, but like from the get-go, it was a defensive stance, and a wanting to deny a stance, and a whataboutism stance, which I called out by name, the whataboutism.
Explain the whataboutism again.
So like I bring up, women's struggle with being listened to by healthcare providers. Okay. Right? And then you might say, oh, well, what about when men aren't listened to? Or what about, false self-diagnosis that you bring to a doctor's office from WebMD or something like that. And it's like, you're not going to address the specific point I've raised. Instead, you will bring up a secondary point, somewhat related, but also not related, and want to immediately jump to that instead, or to discredit my point by saying, what about, and bringing up another point, without actually directly addressing mine with logic or facts or history or science, and instead pivoting to, well, what about this, and da-da-da-da-da. So you put me on the defensive, or you want to detract my point by bringing up something else. Trump does it all the time.
I just don't think
politicians do it all the time.
Some people don't realize there's a name to that, I don't think.
Yeah, it's whataboutism. It's one of those like logical fallacies. There's a bunch of logical fallacies. Yeah. Straw man argument's another one that is used a lot in this area, I feel like, where I make an argument about women not being listened to in healthcare settings, and then they will mischaracterize the point I'm making and attack the mischaracterization. So like, for example, with the women in healthcare thing. So you can say, oh, well, you're saying that you're saying that women know more than their healthcare providers then. And that the doctors should just follow the directions of the woman in the office. Well, and then they start arguing against that line of thought. But that's not even my line of thought. They made up something that's a caricature of mine, and they attack that instead.
And what's the logical fallacy where they start attacking the person?
Ad hominem attacks. Okay. They can't attack your logic or your facts. So instead they attack to discredit you as the person who's giving the logic and the facts.
Got it.
So then you just won't be listened to. You're right, but you won't be listened to.
I would like to read a couple follower stories.
Okay, yeah.
These are direct messages I've received from people over the time that we've done this. Mm-hmm. So I'm a 34-year-old female, and when I was 18, I had to have a colectomy. Do you know what that is? Like a resection of the bowel. Okay. They took out my entire large intestines, and even some of my small intestines. I had my daughter by then, live in the South, married, and a very young mother. After my colectomy, my doctor told me I had about a 75 to 80% chance of death if I were to have another baby. I tried and tried and tried to get a hysterectomy, and they all said no. At first, it's because I was no longer married. They said my future husband may want a child of his own, and later told me I was too young, that I couldn't have a hysterectomy till I was at least 25. They said I had to be married and have at least 2 children and have my husband's written permission in order to have the hysterectomy. So I tried to get my tubes tied instead. Again, I wasn't married, so I was running into the exact same problem. My older brother, we have the same last name, came to an appointment with me to a new doctor in a different state and pretended to be my husband. With his help, I was able to get my tubes tied. I was 21 years old. At the time of my tubal ligation, I was diagnosed with endometriosis. The surgeon told me it was so bad that my uterus, left ovary, and intestines were all connected via scar tissue. It was severe and extremely painful. They still wouldn't help me. I went to an OBGYN in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina. I lived in Georgia at the time. All said I needed my husband's permission. From 21 to 31, I went to at least a dozen different doctors trying to get the hysterectomy that would improve my quality of life and stop the process of scar tissue forming into my abdomen. So endometriosis is like that uterine tissue that's growing outside the uterus, so it's causing adhesions now, right? So that's what she's saying, is that she's got this endometriosis. It's causing all these adhesions. When they go back in and they see this, they tell her, your intestines, all this stuff.
Yeah. They won't do anything.
I moved to Las Vegas when I was 30, and my family doctor saw the history and images from the South. She was livid and shocked. By the time I was sent to an OB in Las Vegas, it was too severe for a normal OBGYN to handle. They were scared they would accidentally cut into what intestines I had left because they had to be separated surgically before they could remove the uterus itself. Okay, so she got her tubes tied, but her uterus still remained. Right, she's going to get the hysterectomy, and now her uterus is adhered. I was then sent to the Women's Cancer Center in Vegas where a specialist saw me. It was, again, too severe for them. Anyway, they sent me to a surgeon in Colorado who was able to separate my organs and give me the hysterectomy. He said that the scar tissue was so bad that it was cutting off blood flow to my left ovary. They were shocked when I told them of my decade-long story. He said if they would have done the surgery when I was 20 to 25 years old, it would have made a huge difference in my quality of life. Sorry, this was so long. I have all the paperwork if there's anything you need clarification on. I love your videos. You're amazing.
Oh my God. I cannot believe that is in the country that I live in. Oh my God. They can see the initial doctor's records that say you have a 70 to 80% chance of death if you get pregnant.
Yes.
And they still wouldn't do it.
Yes.
That is, oh my gosh, that is such BS. That is insane.
And they left that even when she got her tubes tied with her brother's help.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh.
With her brother's help in a different state she had to go to.
Yeah.
Inequitable healthcare right there. In the fact, not only do you have to go to different states, and not only do you need your brother to pretend that he's your husband. What if you don't have the resources to do all that stuff? Yeah. That's travel. She went to, she had to go to a different region. She had to go to a different region of the country, not just a different state. She had to leave the South to do it. Insane. So then I did ask her if we could share this on our podcast.
Yeah.
And she said, yes, absolutely. She says, you're more than welcome to share it because I'd seriously love for other Southern women or anybody else to know that it isn't hopeless and that they can go on vacation to Nevada or Colorado for a fun time and get the surgery they can at home. I'd love for them to know that not every state makes you have your husband's permission.
There needs to be some type of travel fund that women could draw from to leave their region to get something done somewhere else. I would love it if the federal government, in terms of in healthcare provision, were to provide specifically for women a travel expense thing.
Yeah, or
for
they
lodging
could just
and plane tickets
improve women's healthcare.
Well, yeah, or just make the things that are being done in different regions illegal. Yeah. Gosh, that has to be illegal. Those medical professionals should all lose their licenses, but it's all of them, it sounds like. Oh my gosh. That feels so dystopian. That feels so dystopian. I'm having trouble reconciling that's reality.
That's just one story, one woman, one place.
Whoa.
So many women have endometriosis. So many women have abdominal adhesions because their uterus remains.
Because a doctor won't take it out.
Because what? You're not married. Oh, you might want kids.
Yeah, but what if it kills me?
Yeah.
Well, sorry. Kid's more important than you.
Well,
isn't
that kind of the rhetoric, right?
Yeah. Jeez. Well, it keeps reinforcing that women have an instrumental value, not an intrinsic value. You're used as an instrument for life, but your life is not as important as the life that you bring in.
Exactly.
Oh my God. 70 to 80% chance of death. And that's what, I've known the brother thing, we've talked about some of this stuff before, but the fact that it's in her chart, this chance of death, and nobody will still touch her.
And she's got her posing husband.
Oh my God. Yeah, it makes me not want to have any of my daughters live in the South. None of them. Please don't live there is what it feels like. And I'm not saying this everything in the South is bad or everybody who lives down there is bad or whatever, but for medical purposes, I don't want you to live in the South. Because you can't get things done that you need. She listed so many different states in that region that she went to.
Yeah. I'm going to read another one. This one's from a couple months back. I had a pretty rough 18 to 23 years. I was an exotic dancer. I thought money was everything. I grew up with both of my parents and they struggled for everything that they had. And I wanted to try and give myself a better life. And I thought that way to do that was money. I didn't know how horrible, possessive, and downright disgusting some men can be. These are men that hold political offices, have served our country, teachers, and farmers, every single one of them, whether I was dancing or I was out in public. I was an object. I would tell people what happened to try and get help, and I would be laughed at. I put this on myself because I was an exotic dancer, just trying to make a living. I was in an abusive relationship. I have a bend in my back from my father from bending me over the countertop backwards. He locked me out of the house with my son inside when it was 115 degrees outside, and I was in sweatpants and a hoodie. I finally got the nerve to leave.
This was her father or her child's father?
Here. I think it was her child's father.
Okay. My gosh.
Her child's father thought since I was a dancer, he could take what he wanted from me. I still remember when my son was 4 years old, my son's father's fiance was sitting in the car and he came down to my apartment to get our son for his visitation. And he pinned me against the wall and kissed me and tried to make me have sex with him, saying, I just need this from you. I'm now married with an amazing husband, but I would choose the bear every single time because at least he would kill me instead of letting me live with all this in my head and being scared for my now daughter. As a mom, I'm petrified and overprotective. And dancing wasn't the only time I had bad things happen to me. When I was a teenager with my brother's friends, they thought I was cute. My story hurts so bad, but I would love to share my story. I know there's millions out there just like me. I know there's people that are scared to speak. In my life, that's all I want to do is help others. And this is how I help others, by helping them find a voice. I also am in a battle with the company. I won't say it because I don't know if that's going to legally be a problem. But she's in a battle with a company right now because of sexual harassment from a supervisor and another employee that has really taken a toll on me. I don't like to leave my house because I see these people out and about, and I haven't been working a steady job for a couple years now because you never know what someone's going to do. You never know what someone else's intentions are. So I would like to bring awareness to this.
Oh my God.
It's interesting that in different professions, and it's not just exotic dancing, you could even say this with waitressing, bartending. I think also to some extent airplane stewardess.
Yeah.
That there's this entitlement because you are in this profession, you exist to serve me.
Yeah. Can I share some thoughts?
Yeah.
Like, this is so inhumane, this treatment of this woman. It is infuriating, the level of disrespect, and my main point, the level of dehumanization. How do you have slavery happen? Oh, you're 3/5 of a person, which is representative of the mindset of the time. How do you allow a Holocaust to happen? You dehumanize people who are Jewish. How does this type of behavior happen to women? Because men dehumanize in their minds, dehumanize women. Don't see them as human first. See them as some type of object or something that like they want. And it's like, I feel like there need to be t-shirts. Like, it's a very simple idea, like women are people. Women are human.
Yeah.
Like, just that women are people. And you have this uphill battle. I don't think this is the only reason, but I think it's a big one. But you have this uphill battle because I don't know what the percentages are. You could probably look them up, but like the percent of young men that are engrossed in pornography as their adolescent brains with their neuroplasticity are being wired. And they are being wired and solidified in that women are something that they want to experience, not a person. Because you're seeing all this dehumanization in pornography. And so like you have just so many men view women not as people first.
I do blame a lot on porn, but I think where my hang up is with that is what was the excuse before porn? Because things were real bad.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. I'm not saying that.
Oh, I know.
It's a big one. Okay.
I'm just saying that like I do also like to blame a lot on pornography. And I do think it plays a huge role, especially in what women are expected to look like and what sex is supposed to look like. and the dehumanization and stuff. But women's been dehumanized through centuries and centuries. Right. So it's always been that way. And you talk about epigenetics, you talk about people talk about how when women are called crazy, they lose their minds. Okay. Well, it's not that surprising if you look at like epigenetically speaking, if you were called crazy,
lobotomized,
like your life was at risk. And so there's this like almost like matriarchal rage. Okay. This feminist rage, right? Raging feminist, right? Well, I think epigenetically guys have that. They have to actively work. I think they are pre-born probably with some of this wiring epigenetically. And they have to actively deprogram themselves, not just culturally, but like your inclination will probably be to lose your mind when you are challenged
by a woman.
So
you need a bunch of men to raise their sons differently so that the epigenetics can have something different to be passed down epigenetically.
And that would be generations and generations because epigenetics go, way back.
Yeah, 3 to 8, right?
I think it's something like that. So I just think that was a new thought that I had that I haven't thought about before. You're going to have this predisposition, this lean. I'm not talking about that, everybody comes out like raging against women. That's not what I'm talking about. But you have this lean, just like women have this lean towards being defensive when they're called crazy.
Yeah.
Or this lean to be rageful when things are inequitable. That seems sometimes out of context to people. I think we have inherited rage, and I think that men have inherited dehumanization of others. I mean, they dehumanized people, enslaved them. They dehumanized women. They dehumanized their children. So how are you not coming out with some kind of predisposition leaning that's negative towards women?
I have an interesting thought with that.
Okay.
Because you taught me not that long ago about how when do you first see disparity between men and women in ancient cultures? Well, it's when warfare started, right? Okay. I think warfare is deep in men because, I mean, come on. You watch Braveheart, you feel nothing as a man. You watch Lord of the Rings, you watch Gladiator, like these films that I was raised in, like you feel this masculine, like heck yeah, I'm gonna go to, like, it's there's something that is in you that we identify as masculinity that is that warfare thing. What do you have to do to get through warfare? Dehumanize the people you're fighting against. Because if you view them as human like you, I don't think psychologically your brain can take that. You have to view them as something quote unquote other than you. So I wonder if epigenetically going back millennia, it's in men to dehumanize or view another race or women as quote unquote other, because then your brain can compartmentalize and not like you disassociate from the humanity. You know what I mean? And I wonder if that goes back millennia.
I wonder if video games is not helping that.
Because you're tapping into that more primal warfare type thing.
Yeah, and it's not real people.
No.
So it's okay to do that.
Because it's an avatar.
And the way that people talk to people online as they're playing is brutal.
I see. I don't even know what that's like. I'm not a gamer.
But it's true. And so it's interesting. I think if a man is really looking to pink pill himself, I think it is great to consume the content that we're putting out there, to read books. I know a lot of people have recommended The Invisible Woman, and to read about these things. But I think also another great practice is, where do you disconnect, or where are you dehumanizing?
Yeah. And you got to stop feeding that part of your brain.
And stop feeding that part. Yes.
Yeah. And if any guys are listening, it's not like, oh, you got to stop playing Call of Duty. But it's like, are you gaming with people that talk a certain way? Be honest with yourself. Is it affecting you somehow? Or do an experiment. If you were to stop playing these games a couple weeks and then notice, is there a difference in your mental state or emotional state or your view? Just do a little experiment for 2 weeks and see, do you feel different?
I think that's a great idea. I want to swing the pendulum a little bit and say, superhumanizing somebody is also dehumanizing somebody. So when you're talking about these athletes, and you're talking about these people that they are your superheroes, that is dehumanization.
Kind of like with celebrities. Pre-COVID
Exactly.
more so, but yeah.
Yes, that is dehumanization.
Huh. And then paparazzi just go after these poor, teenage 20-something-year-old celebrities because they're dehumanized in a superhuman way.
Yes.
That's disgusting.
So it's not just the negativity of like, oh, okay, I can see very plainly that, video games could play into that or this could play into that. But no, like sports play into that too.
Mm-hmm.
We are taught to idolize and put on pedestals people who are not us.
Yeah.
And once you do that, obviously it works the other way too. Like when we talk about Black people in pain and the dehumanization of Black people, leading to the fact that medical professionals still believe that Black people have a higher pain tolerance. That's dehumanization.
Or like I was just speaking to that board member the other day for the HOA, and she was talking about, as a therapist, how a lot of people have this implicit bias that, people of color are looking for drugs, not mental health help.
Yeah,
You're dehumanizing them by like, oh, you are this archetype.
Right.
I automatically label you as this archetype of a person,
Because it's easier for our brains to categorize people.
Well, it takes less energy.
Than it is, to learn about people. It's easier to categorize people than to learn about people.
Yeah.
That we see this in politics, we see this in race, we see this in women, men, any kind of divide where there's an other, your brain's going to try to fit the other into a category so that it doesn't have to do more work.
Oh, God, religion?
Religion, yeah.
Yeah, because now it's us and them.
Anytime there's an in-group and an out-group, or an us and a them, anytime there's this dichotomy in humanity, there is danger of dehumanization.
When I was a teacher, a big thing that I learned, in particularly with my work with special education educators in department, is using people-first language. People first. Not like this intellectually disabled student. You were to say, a student that has an intellectual disability. The first word in the phrase is the humanizing word. And that's the way you're supposed to do it in education.
People have issues when I say female because it's not human enough.
Oh.
It's women.
Yeah.
So I try really hard to say that.
Whoa.
But I slip up a lot.
You can even say people who are female.
People who are female.
I've heard men refer to women as females.
Which is a derivative of male, which is a whole other thing. But okay.
Usually it's used in like a complaining way.
Oh.
Or like I've heard it. Now I have a limited experience.
But tell me, can you think of an example?
Like, man, these females.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I've heard that before. Yeah, but I don't think I've ever heard it used in a positive. That's more like, oh, look at all the ladies. Or all these women.
Or what a woman.
But I've heard female used more in a complaining way.
Like, so derogatory.
Yeah.
Towards women. Versus.
Yeah. And it's a less human of a word.
No one's going to say that's a sexy female. But someone might say that's a sexy woman.
Yeah, I haven't heard that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I also don't know how much of that is cultural because I'm white. And so I wonder if there's a cultural component I'm unaware of with that. So I don't want to speak too much into it,
But as a white man, you hear the word female being used in more of a derogatory way than a positive way.
Yeah.
So the people first language would be a woman or a person who
is female. Yeah.
If you're going to use the word female.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Which just sounds unnatural to talk that way. So
right. So you would say a woman. Exactly.
Yeah. Man, but even saying woman, I feel like is not as humanizing. Because it's from man too.
Yes. You're right.
They say female drivers when they're talking about how women supposedly can't drive as well.
Right.
Even though their insurance rates are lower because they're less risky. Let's just look at the stats and the math.
The mental gymnastics.
I have a math degree. I do not understand when people don't look at the numbers. You're not looking at reality if you're not looking at the numbers.
Do you think it's because women are more verbal processors? And so they're talking more, maybe they're not, but like they're talking more out loud about the decisions they're making when they're driving, or they don't seem as confident when they're driving?
It might be a confidence thing that is perceived.
So the guys being over arrogant is really like feeding into this idea that...
Yeah, because guys, take more risky behavior because we feel a little bit more like emboldened or untouchable.
And why not? The world's made for you.
Yeah, like
You're pretty comfy.
I know what that feels like to do something. You have disregard for what could happen because you just feel like a level of instability. And I felt that more when I was a teenager, in my early 20s, than I do now as I'm older. But I remember how that feels.
Well, we're going to have to close out this episode because we have to go get our kids at preschool.
Yeah.
Because we're real people who have real responsibilities,
Yeah.
Unfortunately. That isn't just sitting around and talking about these issues. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, this was great. I hope people listening, something was intriguing or it sparked curiosity or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok at Caters88.